So hello and welcome everyone to our panel discussion, where we want to have a dialogue, not a debate, on the topic of participation and integration of refugees and migrants. This topic, of course, is very relevant to ISWI. Here at ISWI, we try to build a foundation for intercultural dialogue, as Dr. Steiner-Brinn was so eloquently telling us about in the opening ceremony. And as a moderator, we are happy to introduce Dr. Franziska Schmidtke. Dr. Schmidtke is the head of Research Center for Right-Wing Extremism, for Democracy Building and Societal Integration at Friedrich Schiller University, Jena. And she will take it from here.
Hannes, and also a warm welcome from me to our panel discussion, Integration and Participation of Refugees and Migrants, here at the International Student Week of Ilmenau. We were able to secure as well a very knowledgeable as also diverse panel. So I would like to introduce to you our panelists. Please come up to the stage. We have María Álvarez Monge. She's coming right now. Brian Kanaahe and Rahmatullah Batoor. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Actually, since our panelists work on so many projects and have so many experiences that expand on so many fields and topics, I wouldn't be able to do them justice in introducing them, so I will now ask them to introduce themselves, to tell us a little bit about what they are working on right now, what their main projects are, and what their perspectives on the topic of tonight's panel is. Brian, maybe you want to start?
Yes. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Brian Kanaahe. I work as a manager for resilience and innovations for the Red Cross, Uganda Red Cross to be specific. From time to time, my daily job is to work with both refugees and host communities in ensuring general resilience, that is, ability of the communities to bounce back from the impacts impacts of refugees in the country. I link the community with the national level actors and including international actors. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much also for joining us. You had quite some traveling to do to get here. María had a slightly less amount of traveling. She came all the way from Berlin. Please also tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, yes, all the way from Berlin, but I am originally from Costa Rica, Central America, and I came to Germany September 2015. It's going to be 4 years, and a little bit more than 6 months took me to develop a project further, which is called Migration Hub Network, and I founded it, and I became a migrant entrepreneur, which is now kind of giving back to other migrants, becoming an entrepreneurs as well. So what we do is basically we offer training and mentoring support for migrants while becoming entrepreneurs. I know the hardships, we know how hard it is, but we also know the opportunity that exists in Germany to dynamize the economy and to make migrants also to give back as I have done it until now. So thanks for the invite.
Thank you. And then to my right we have Rahmatullah. He's joining us from Erfurt.
Very close to here. Thank you very much. Thank you for the organizing team. It's a hard work. And thanks for coming, joining the event. My name is Rahmatullah Batoor, and I live and work in Erfurt. I co-founded Migranten Omid Verein, or Migrants Omid Association, Move e.V. I come originally from Afghanistan and have been living in Germany since 3 years. I thought and I saw that there are challenges with the integration of refugees and migrants, specifically a big number of refugees from Afghanistan in Thuringia and in Germany. So we started a voluntary project of supporting the refugees in practical ways, in translation, in accompanying to the administrative offices, and in working with them, knowing more about Germany and presenting their own culture, and that developed to Migranten Omid Verein, or Move e.V. And I'm happy to be here. I also had worked with international NGOs in Afghanistan, so I would bring both in Germany, in Afghanistan, the perspectives, and I hope I can answer your questions.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yes. Just a little bit about how we are going to conduct this talk tonight. At first we will be able to answer some questions I prepared here on the panel, and after around about 45 minutes, we will open the discussion, and then you will be able to join and to ask what your questions are, and also what you would like to put into the debate. So. Well, since we have such a diverse panel up here, first of all, I would like to go back to Brian. And as he already told us, he wears really a lot of hats. I mean, he works for the Red Cross. He works with WHO. He did a PhD. He's also a lecturer, so he really does a lot. I was mostly interested when I read in your CV that you are right now a community resilience manager, or you're managing community resilience. What exactly contains community resilience, and why is it so important to work on the level of communities?
Thank you, Doc. And the job of a community resilience person, or if you're working in general resilience, you're looking at, you're strengthening the work of the communities, you're strengthening your work as an institution, but also for a national, in terms of at country level, because one, you look at preparedness, the preparedness part of the institution and the country for in case refugees or any other emergency arises. So because generally resilience means ability to bounce back. So it's best that you actually prepare for something that has not yet happened. And if you're able to anticipate and forecast that, for example, Uganda is in a zone where there is always potential that neighboring countries can enter into some form of disagreements, and they are going to find where to go. And because of our internal policies and laws in Uganda regarding migration, which we're going to talk about now, refugees or people can actually cross borders and come to the country. So that is part of my job, to measure the temperatures and monitor the temperatures in the neighboring countries, and then we alert the systems, both internally as the Red Cross movement, but also other actors and the government to prepare. So that is the part of anticipation and preparing for shocks and stressors that might happen. But also when you work in resilience, you're actually also looking at the quality and the time of your response. which means that in case people actually coming into the country, how fast do they get the basic needs of life and the quality? And because that matters, because if you work in the humanitarian context, dignity is very important. Then we have these protracted or long-term cases where people stay for long time. So you also have to think of how do you work, or how do I work to ensure that the people who stay longer go into their expanded solutions, durable solutions, long-term, presence in the country, which leads to integration and, working with the communities where they are living and they feel that they are part of that. Mm-hmm. So generally, that is the scope that a manager for resilience with the community works in. Thank you.
Thank you. To some extent, I think it sounds a little bit familiar to maybe also what Ramat is doing here in Erfurt, in Thuringia. I think Germany and also Thuringia, to some extent, was kind of shocked when in 2015 the numbers of refugees rose to a level that we haven't managed a long time since then. And so maybe your work is also a little bit like that what Brian was talking about. You're also managing kind of shock. Your work focuses on the volunteers who were helping also in those first stages of when people arrived, when people needed shelter, needed food, needed just like the basics. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the role of the volunteers right now in Germany?
Thank you. Yes, I think, when refugees and migrants arrive somewhere, obviously they are a group of people new to the host society or the place they arrive. And it's obviously similar everywhere. In Uganda, maybe also like in Germany. When refugees return back to their countries, it's the same thing. They face a new situation, they need support. And the local population or the host community also face new people and new identities, new cultures, and they also need to understand that and need to prepare for that. What we do is try to bring them together, try to advocate for the refugees, and try to represent their identities, their culture, the way of life, and on the other side, vice versa also. Try to bring volunteers, people from Germany living in Erfurt, living in Thuringia, to share experiences, to share ideas with refugees, to interact more. Well, social connection is the first step that refugees and local population need to understand each other. And that's the starting point. For that, you need language, you need the cultural knowledge, and you need a sense of safety and a sense of stability to talk to the people. That is the first step, and then it can develop into employment, it can develop into projects together, it can develop into better integration in a whole, to say. So we are also trying to get the people talk and get in touch and know about where the people come from and know about how things are being done differently here. So it should be both sides. Integration is a two-way street. So it's a two-way process that people should try to come together, learn from one another, and live together in a multicultural society.
Thank you. And I think, Anna, maybe your work comes in a little bit later, after the first shock is over, after like a little bit of the integration process is already done. Then migrants and also refugees come to the migration hub. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work and I think also I wrote on your website that the Migration Hub actually was founded as a sort of resolution for the initial shock, or for what was called in Germany the refugee crisis, which is very debatable. But maybe you can also tell us a little bit about why then, why in 2015, why was this the initial point?
Well, because I arrived in 2000, I'm kidding. No, listen, it's really interesting what you're saying, because that's exactly what happened a lot, especially in big cities like Berlin. In September 2015, I arrived to Berlin about the 22nd of September, just like at the end. I arrived, and we Latinos, there are more Latinos around here, we always want to go in and we want to join every group. We're never calm, right? We want to do everything. So I guess because of that, I started to look in the internet, focus groups and activities and meetups and stuff. My background is in human rights, and I already worked for a while with people from 130 countries altogether, including people coming from Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, Israel, living together as well in one campus. I already had the experience, and then when I came here and I saw how can I contribute it. I basically quitted my job back in Costa Rica, and then I moved here, not because of that, I wanted to come here, and let's say the timing was the right way. So I came here as many other migrants to try to find a way, how to try to find another opportunity to work here. And then in the meantime, I said, I'm going to find, I don't know, maybe how can I collaborate? So I started to join many of these meetups, and it was full of local people trying to find innovative, they used to call it innovative solutions to that refugee crisis. And as an expert in human rights and in the topic of migration, I said, how can we solve this if we don't stop wars, I mean, it's a nice way to see it, and then you saw companies, and then you saw all these design thinkers, and a lot of innovation happening, which is great. Where I come from, I've never seen such a mobilization. And I still think it's very laudable that Germany has and had so many people trying to mobilize in many ways. People tapping into the real needs, and even younger people trying to figure out what to do. However, what I found is, this saying in English, that the road to hell is paved by good intentions. I found many good ideas, brilliant ideas, but practically speaking, those were not going to happen, right? For many reasons. Also because in many of these meetups, I think we, the so-called expats, we were the ones who were there. I didn't see anybody from Africa or the refugees coming from Syria or not even Afghanistan there. So I found that was missing. So that's why it took me a while to, at the beginning, Migration Hub, and these are the kind of crazy things that I saw that I think we will never see again. The place where we had initially as my first Migration Hub in Berlin was donated by a person that I never even met, right? And I was like, what is this? This is luxury. Who would give you the keys of something that nobody knows you, right? So I tried to kind of bridge that, because where I come from, I need a little bit more structure and a little bit more seriousness towards the things. So it took me a while to kind of understand the ecosystem around me, Berlin, the migrants missing, and myself as a migrant. So I was going through both at the same time. I arrived, I saw all this, I saw an opportunity, not only for me and for the migrants who were missing in that room, but also I was going through the pain as well of being a migrant. What does it mean to be on the pain of being a migrant? I came already with a career. I worked already for 13 years before jumping to Germany. I know I look very young, but I'm not that young. I don't know, I think I sent more than 100 applications to get a job. Not a single call. Well, actually 2, but the interview didn't go very well. Because actually, most of the times people were asking me, how did you manage to study and to work at the same time? Well, because in our reality, in other parts of the world, we have no choice, right? Here, more or less until 30, because you go to masters, PhDs, and so on. But in other places, like in Latin America, we have no choice to study and work at the same time. So so kind of starting to break that barrier or that understanding how other cultures work worried me about all these migrants arriving to Germany and going through the integration process. And then I thought, no, there needs to be something else. So that's why I first created a network that brought all these social projects and new projects together. So in total, we counted 120 in Berlin and more than 500 across Germany. So we started to offer them not only the physical spaces where to work, but as an excuse to bring them and to coach them and to guide them on how to do a real impact, how to put refugees and migrants in the center of their solutions, and how to actually start already the conversation and see a network as an opportunity to discover what are the needs that migrants have and had, and dividing into topics. So of course, when you arrive, you need legal services, you need translation services, you need language services, housing, blah, 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 education, these livelihoods, jobs, entrepreneurship, and things like that. So that's how we started to allocate the different projects. But the interesting thing is that while I was becoming an entrepreneur, it inspired also many other migrants and refugees who knocked my door and saying, how do you do it? We want to do it as well. So this is how a year later, we also developed this network of migrant entrepreneurs. Well, actually first the acceleration program, which has been happening in a collaboration with other partners in Berlin, Helsinki, Brussels, and Milan. And in total, we've been coaching, training, and mentoring around 82 migrants, and we have created 32 new businesses. And now we're welcoming this entire network of migrant entrepreneurs, not only in Germany, but outside Europe. And this is how other hubs became to be in Berlin and Heidelberg. And now we're collaborating with the private sector as well. We just did an interesting partnership with WeWork, where we are going to also develop further this migrant entrepreneurship. Because all these things happen because of the need of a migrant wanting to work, a need of a migrant wanting to make a living in Germany, and finding that there are many others like myself who were not having these opportunities as well.
Ahmad, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think if it's okay to
sure. Go ahead.
Start it without asking you.
Go ahead.
Well, that's the point. I want to connect to what you said. Migrants want to and need to find opportunities. That's the big issue. The first opportunity for migrants and refugees is to find a new home, especially for the refugees, because they flee conflicts, hot conflicts for their lives. And the basic thing they want is a welcome, a smile. And 2015 and 16 showed us that the power of volunteering in Germany is very big. Like, you cannot underestimate it. It's a big
2 million.
It's a big power. So this area need to be utilized further, volunteers. And what we do is, not only should the Germans or the local society, to say it in general, volunteer to support the refugees and migrants. The migrants and refugees should volunteer themselves too, to support themselves or support the locals. It should go by like the both ways. And the basic thing that a migrant needs is acceptance first, that you are part of the society, that you have a residence permit, and then that should start. We have Germany as an example here, and we have, for example, for the Afghan refugees, we have Iran, another example. Maybe there are some difference in culture, but let's compare these two countries. Like in Iran, the Afghans speak the same language, they believe in the same religion, they have the same kind of culture, background, but they don't feel welcomed. In Germany, they don't speak the language. It's hard to speak the language. And they don't have the cultural they don't share the same cultural identity and background, but most of them, when they are accepted and welcome, they feel at home. What is the difference? Because the state institutions, the society at large, they're ready to accept, they're ready to support and welcome. I mean, not all the people, but majority of the people have this kind of little welcoming relationship, and there are some bases of, there are some rights that the refugees can have in Germany that they don't have in those countries. So this is very important that the refugees and migrants receive that perception, or have that perception that there is acceptance and tolerance for them, and that they're not extra people. Yeah. And then my integration can start. Otherwise, integration is not talked about, because you need to be accepted, and then you start going to find a job, learn a language, and these doors can open to you. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, you both raised really good points, and I really admire all of your work that you're doing. But I'm still struggling, because I think it's kind of your work comes in at a point where state policy leaves a gap. You have a peer-to-peer method, and you raise awareness for the volunteer work, but that only means that state policy isn't doing completely what they maybe should be doing. Yeah. They just, and that's where I want to bring Brian back into the conversation, because maybe it would help us to also broaden our perspective and look at what the refugee policy in other countries look like. You can tell us a little bit about what Uganda is doing right now. I would like to shift the perspective here back to Uganda and to the refugee policy over there, because recently there were some international articles showing us or stressing how good Uganda is doing, and how well they are trying to integrate refugees coming into their land by, for example, giving them small plots of land on which they will be able to build houses and cultivate crops and things like that. But earlier, when we talked before this talk, you also mentioned that there are some flaws in the refugee policy. So maybe you can give us a little bit of the overall scope. What is Uganda doing really good, and maybe also where can we actually learn from Uganda? But also, please be so nice and tell us what's not working right now.
Yeah, thanks. The Uganda has a refugee policy dated as far back as 2006, but actually it's been functional for quite a long time. Uganda's experience with refugees can be traced back as 1914, actually. And they documented cases in northern Uganda, where we border with South Sudan. That border was not there until 1914. So entry was double happiness, entry-exit. But right now, Uganda put up a policy to not only say refugees are welcome, but to tell us internally, one, as people, as Ugandans, to know that it is our job, it is our obligation to actually welcome people, in this case that we're calling strangers, to welcome strangers. So it is an obligation. And so there is a comprehensive refugee response framework, which has actually 5 pillars, and mainly it covers the part for we Ugandans, the private sector, the role of NGOs, the role of academia, and the role of the government, of course, and the role of INGOs, international non-government organizations, and actually donors. So there is a first let me talk about the part of participation. One, in the 5 pillars of the comprehensive refugee response framework, it talks about admission and rights. And just like my colleague Rahmatullah here just said, there has to be a part of acceptance, that when a migrant or refugee comes to the country, is going to be accepted. But then there still has to be something that is actually going to hold me accountable to accept you. You don't just only come to my home and it's because somebody, and I accept you, So the policy is there as by government to say, oh, in fact, you as a district, you need to have, because one, you're situated proximally to a place, a geographical location where most likely you're going to get refugees. So there's specific land owned by the government because of the policy to say, in case we get refugees, this is where we will put them during the emergency phase. So for me, that is really very important, and countries, if they are in such areas that they know by their location, they can anticipate and know that we will have a high probability that we shall receive refugees. So what are we preparing before they come? Because if you don't do that, trouble is going to happen. The second part is of participation, and that is the participation of refugees and migrants to have a voice to say something that concerns them when they're in the country. And that talks about from the lowest level when they arrive at what we call a refugee settlement, because we don't call them camps, by the way. Mm-hmm. And that is by policy as well. So camps would mean you're camped in one place and that is it. But a settlement means you're actually in there and you're free to move around. So anyway, that is just a nomenclature. So at the settlement level, within the steering committee at the local level, there has to be representation of refugees. And there we have refugees, we have refugee startups, women-led, young people-led refugee organizations. And so they are selected based on, of course, their networks, how many refugees they get to and all that. And then they are represented at the decision-making level. So that, for example, they have access to know which projects the Red Cross movement or any other organization is bringing, and how actually we participate, not as beneficiaries, but we participate in the implementation, design, and accountability. And that actually reflects through to the national level, where we have a comprehensive response refugee framework steering committee. Now, this is the highest decision-making body within the refugee response, headed by the Office of the Prime Minister. And there are different ministries, but there are 2 representatives of refugees. And that is one male, one female, and that you can't debate about it actually. So you have those enablers in place to capture all these occurrences. Then the other part, which I wanted to say on the working, because I'm trying to bring in the aspect of what actually is making it work. It's you have this steering committee at the national level that actually dictates that, not dictates, but guides that if you're going to have donor funding, this one is earmarked specific for refugee-led NGOs. Mm-hmm. You get me? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So you have, of course, you have these NGOs which we are working with and for refugees. But they're those that are refugee-led. So they should have access to funding to address concerns that you as an NGO, you may not actually reach to. This is what we call the Refugee Access Framework. And the RAF, we call it, is a combination of other startups of NGOs, of refugees and migrants, And it addresses wider issues, even of climate and environment issues. Yeah. So you have this, I would say that you have this policy, strong policy that is put up to cover both at the local level up to the national level. But with that, of course, comes with some flaws. Some would not say that we have the perfect model. Because one, Uganda also is a country that both technology in general is improving. And if you're having an emergency where you're getting at least 20,000, 50,000 refugees a day, it is going to impact a lot on your ability to capture information on, or the biodata of who entered with what, where, and all this. So we've had challenges before in ascertaining actually how many refugees we've had, until most recently when a biometric study, verification supported by UNHCR, has given birth to a number of about 1.15 million actually refugees. So that was a challenge before, because if you stand up and you're actually saying that we have over 1.5 million refugees, what does that mean exactly for planning purposes? Then also we've had challenges because settlements, we're not talking about small settlements, we're talking about big settlements. And some of them have reached carrying capacity, they cannot hold any more refugees. And so you must have, we've had the challenge of the refugees accessing markets outside the settlement. Okay, look, of course there are markets in the settlement, but if you must trade, if you must do business, you must get out of the settlement, because you're only doing intra-settlement trade. Mm-hmm. You need to now link with the other markets. And our settlements, we have transport challenges that on average it is about 20 kilometers from where the settlement is to access a bigger market. So a distance of 20 kilometers and roads are not that good. It is a challenge for somebody to actually access the markets. And I think the other challenge within our policy, it comes along with the investment and the sustainable part. Our policy does not have a little, I wish it would have been where like it's operating this like a business, in a way that you have, yes, you're getting donor funding, for example, to put up these structures in the schools and medical care, but it is good. But how economically are we actually working with the refugees and migrants policy-wise to ensure that we sustain our activities on our own? It's not that that strong. Nevertheless, I must say that the ongoing needs, ongoing emergencies, initiatives to bring and build structures like where refugees and migrants can actually report structures, maybe cases that have happened, addressing issues of the environment, for example. There has been significant efforts put across. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. That was really eye-opening in seeing like the overall scope of how participation of refugees is actually possible and is like is built in. And I think that is what the German case is actually missing.
Yes,
and
I wanted to talk about that.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's start. There's 65 million displaced people, refugees, and asylum seekers all over the world. This is the highest number since World War II. But 86% of them are living in developing countries. The migration crisis that we call in Europe, the so-called migration crisis, is just a shout a loud shout, I think, because the developing countries like Uganda, 1.5 million people living for a long time as refugees in the country, and such a generous state policy for the refugees. Countries like Pakistan, like Turkey, they are hosting, like Jordan, they're hosting much higher number of refugees than in any other European country. What is missing here in Europe and in Germany is to see that how rich the country is, but how less generous the country is also. And in terms of like GDPs, you can check Uganda. Uganda is not a very affluent country compared to Germany, for example. But the policy implemented in Uganda is very much pro-refugee as compared to even in Germany and many other European countries. The reason is that something is missing in Germany, and that is that we treat refugees as externals, as completely stranger people. And as a stranger, you are accommodated in camps. You have to report every night that you're there. And then after a very bureaucratic process, you receive a paper or residence permit or not. And then you will receive this feeling that you are treated like a person completely outsider. And that's in itself is a hindrance for participation, a hindrance for integration as the first step. When we compare camps with settlements, for example, with quotas for migration, for refugees, fundings for refugees in Uganda and in Germany, that's completely two different worlds, two different kinds of treatments. I think the new development that you see, that you pointed at in Germany, the rise of the right-wing parties and the probability that the refugee laws, which are still in a hard debate in the whole country, will become more restricted on the refugees and migrants in Germany, is a very relevant topic, because this point is missing. Germany treats refugees mostly as external people who are not part of us. There's us and they, and that's the problem, I think. Participation is hindered with this kind of state policy. If the state policy, with such an affluence that Germany has, is pro-refugees and pro-diversity, because scientific researches and experiences show that migration and refugees always contribute to the economy, to the culture, and they're not just load, or they're not a group of people wanting to get things, but they have a lot of things also to give. So if this approach is going to be in the society at large and in the state, like in the government policy, this can be a very good improvement for both the host society, like Germany, for example, and the migrants and refugees who are turning to this country for safety and for a new future, a new start, and a good future. Yeah, you want to say something?
Yes, I want to say, because I agree with all what you're saying except for one thing. I think Germany has been generous, very generous, because I have seen it in the last 3 years. Where this generosity is going, that's another problem. What I like what you said, Brian, is something that, from a European perspective, we need to see a shift and a change. That because we are in this level of the food chain, that doesn't mean that migrants coming from outside don't have a say. So I think it is time for countries like Germany to look at examples outside and how they are doing it. Because I have seen money and millions in organizations run by locals, not run by refugees or migrants themselves. And that is where the problem is, right? I'm not saying that only migrants and refugees should get the money. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because we are seeing the right wing appearing. Why? Because we also have locals whose voices haven't been integrated either to this topic, right? I want to actually don't talk about migrants, but I want to talk about locals. And I just want to give an example that was given to a friend, Martin. Is it Martin around here? No, I lost him. I was making fun because, I am not that old. And until very recent, I found out that on WhatsApp, there is an option where instead of me doing this to send a voice message, you can swipe up the button and then you can talk like this. Well, I didn't know, thank you very much, and all my interns were laughing at me. So I felt very not advanced anymore. And I'm 34, and then I was thinking, what happens with the ones who have plus 34, me? They feel completely outside this, completely. Why am I mentioning this topic? Because it's exactly with the topic of these waves, right? The problem is that there is a part of the society, and here, we are not that far away from it, that feels completely segregated, and they feel they don't have jobs. They don't understand. I mean, we are talking about German, and we're talking about people should be more understandable, but what about the people from the East who never learn English? And let's not put an 80-year-old person to start already learning English, right? So the problem here is we are not integrating both worlds. We are letting the superpowers and the super PACs to make the decision and to make all these fancy things, and we're not including these steering committees that I really like the idea, where we can see both sides of the society. But I'm talking about regular individuals, like you, like me, like this, right? So this is exactly what is missing, because Germany has money, and it's been very generous. In fact, Germany needs, and I don't know if you know this statistic, Germany needs 500,000 migrants per year to continue being economically, the economy continue growing. Do we see a country prepare for that again? I don't, and I don't see it. I see companies ready, and companies struggling with the job centers because they cannot even hire one refugee without going through tons of paperwork. And actually, they would have to invest so much money in their HR departments in order to hire at least 100 refugees, or people with a refugee background, or migrants. So Germany has a luxurious problem that I wish Uganda, Colombia, or Venezuela would have, but we don't. Because, yes, these numbers that you're mentioning is like from 2 years ago. Now, we're not talking about from Honduras. We should be talking about Venezuela. You know how many millions Colombia is hosting right now? Well, let's shift that conversation, because this conversation has to be global. Yeah. And Germany should also share many of the good things that were provided here. I don't know if you know, but there, I mean, I have never seen, I travel a lot, and I have not seen companies engaging in this topic like in Germany. I haven't. And this is an example to other companies around the world. And 2 million people volunteered to welcome asylum seekers in 2015. This is something that we have never seen before. So Germany has a lot to share, and yeah, thank you. Germany has a lot to share, but as well to be humble and also listen to the small individual cases, like it has happened in Uganda as well, where it has sprung a lot of innovation. And let's not forget that there's another population in Germany that really needs help, and they also need support to be included in the society.
Thank you so much. I think we're at the point where we should look into the audience and look for some questions. I think we have a microphone. Yeah, and I see the first hand right there. Yeah, Hannes will come to you and give you the microphone. Please, if you want to stand up and also tell us who you are, and then... Yes.
Good evening, and thank you for your information, actually. Let me start from beginning. Actually, at the first time that I've seen the sentences that you put it in the panel discussion, I had a little bit, misunderstood between refugees and migrants that you put it in one sentences, and because I wanted to draw your attention to some of your sentences and some ideas that you come up for. There are a lot of differences between refugees and migrants. One of them is mandatory one that you don't have any choices, which is called refugees. It's a simple definition. And another one is migrants. There are a lot of differences with each other. Sometimes one migrant can come to your country, but with a wealth, with knowledge to grow your country, economic and GDP, let's say, because of my background. That's why I'm thinking in that way. I've seen refugees as a little bit, sorry for that, but as a cost, but the migrants, they're not the cost. Maybe they would put a value on the country. That was the first thing that it comes to my mind at the beginning. And some of your, that you said, Dr. Rahmatullah, they said, they see, especially in Germany, they see refugees as stranger and from the outside they're here. And is it the same point of view for migrants as well with that definition? And this could be a criticized question for you. And another one is, since that you are working in that field, is what kind of needs you provide to them? You can mention refugees or migrants or both separated. Yeah. It is just the basic needs, and please define the basic needs. Yeah. How you approach that, and what is the reason also to do that in your perspective? Why? And those kind of questions, from what, how, and why, you can answer it. And
so many questions. Can we start with one?
Yeah, each of you can pick up one question.
Okay.
So,
may I ask you where you come from?
Is it related to the topic?
It is related to the topic. We're talking about migration, but no, I mean just in general. Would you like to give an example?
I'm just kidding. I'm from Iran.
From Iraq?
Yeah, Iran.
Okay. Iran?
Yeah, Iran.
Okay. Which kind of residency do you have here?
I don't have.
Student visa?
No. I just came for ISWI for 10 days for the festival, and I just don't have any residence card.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's because I want to give the example because you asked about what is the difference of migrants and refugees and why we've been mixing. In my case, I talk about migrants because that's my organization about. I work with migrants in general, but that's me. You will talk about refugees and also you too, right? So there is definitely a distinction, and for those who doesn't know, actually, I wish many of these asylum seekers and people displaced could also be refugees. That's actually from a human rights perspective. We activists and knowledgeable and people like me who studied human rights, it's something that we should be more active to actually try to make people be refugees and the ones who are fleeing out, because this is not a refugee crisis, this is an asylum seeking crisis. Because I wish everyone would have a refugee status, because that comes with rights and duties from the country that actually gives you the refugee status, right? So from there, we need to kind of like make a huge distinction. That's why, in my case, I call them migrants, because not everyone is a refugee. Actually, only 12 million of these 65 millions have a refugee status. Only 12. So I understand that there are some people who call them all refugees. I prefer to call them migrants. And the reason why I call them migrants, it's because you might think that because I come from Latin America and I look like this, I might not have economical issues, but they are. I also work with a lot of Venezuelans who are not considered refugees and neither asylum seeking. Many of them, for example, that I work with, they were studying in Germany, their master's programs, when their economical crisis happened in their country. And now they're stuck here. They're kind of like in a limbo. That's why I do refer as migrants, because that's part of the organization I do. And that's basically what many of the people have asked me to do, to refer to everyone as migrants, because they don't like this distinction. In fact, in my acceleration program, that the majority of the people attending have a refugee status, they come to my program because they like that there's no distinction, because they're a little bit tired of the refugee word. That's it. I hope that kind of clears it out.
Kind of, yeah. Maybe you have something to add?
Thank you. I wanted to add that, well, refugees and migrants are different. They are different groups. We cannot put them together. You're right. They have different needs, and they face different challenges, and they are treated differently.
By law.
By law, so by state. And there's a difference between these two groups of people, but the common thing among them is that they come to a new country and they need integration, right? So they need to find a new home if they want.
Struggle with language, with money, with jobs.
These are some common things that they have, and well, if we go to what technically refugee is and what migrant is, that's something I think obvious in this room, not to explain. A refugee does not have the choice mostly to go back home or find another place, but a migrant, because he or she traveled freely and can also leave freely, that's the choice. Now, your question, why I say refugees are treated external. I'm comparing a very affluent country to a very poor country, like Germany and Uganda, and I'm trying to explain this thing, how integration could work better. Because in Uganda, it seems that it works better than in Germany, because refugees are part of the structures. They are allowed in the city councils, they are allowed in the president's cabinet, right? So there's opportunity to participate. And they are not called, or they are not allowed, like, considered as outsider people. But I try to link the concept to what Francesca tried to refer, the missing or the new development, the missing thing in Germany. That missing thing is, you're right, that missing thing is that a number of the population are also excluded or are not attended well in terms of economics, in terms of social care and all this stuff. So what the solution is now, that inclusion of all the people who are living or seeking to live in the country, in the process of decision making, in the process of economic opportunities, like in the society at all, like in the power. And if you have this openness, then people will dare to engage, and people will volunteer to engage. Germany opened the borders, 2 million people stood for the refugees. Germany's, like, the state started to send some people back home, like deport people. Now this policy is also this social, this part of society who are feeling excluded are rising up against refugees and migrants.
But can we focus, because he said that he wanted to know about what do we do in terms of needs, what do we offer to refugees?
Well, his question was if migrants are also considered outsiders, right? Yeah. So I try to come to that point. Because refugees came in a big wave, and then the people were shocked, because that was a new experience. That could be a good, a very expectable consequence of that shock. It can become better by learning, by trying to do these cases and learning from other more generous countries. Generosity is more a highlight when it comes from a poor person. Generosity is not a big thing when it comes from a rich person, right? So in these terms, those developing countries are more generous than the European affluent countries.
And to your question about what do we offer to migrants and to refugees, in my case, particularly the ones who are building companies, and let's define what is a company. It could be a shop, could be a restaurant, could be a catering, could be cell phones. We have them all, could be apps. So first and foremost, for the migrants that I work with, who are basically categorized as vulnerable, meaning that they have no savings, they have no money, because when they made the jump, they lost pretty much everything, in particular the ones who have refugee status. Basically, we offer them an office where to register the company, because without that, how could you? And you don't have money for that. We also connect them with local investors and people who can give the initial, in German it's called the Stammkapital, which is the initial capital to start up a business, which is 25,000 euros, and not to everyone. And then before that, we offer them free training and mentoring. That's actually something that annually costs 250,000 euros to do this for them every year, from my case.
Yeah, actually, from the beginning, yeah, you say that if it is a simple definition in this room, we don't need to define the refugees and migrants. So we have to. My point is that we have to be careful to use it to who is refugees, who is migrants, practically, not just on the paper. I'm
sorry, I work with migrants.
No,
I cannot
problem.
say. That's my business.
I just get your point because of my background. Maybe yeah, it is useful somehow. Yeah. Because I've studied in Kurdistan of Iraq, so I have some experience to be such a place, to see camps as you said that there are refugee settlements. We don't call them camps, but we used to call them camps all of the times, even for IDPs, by the way. And we have IDPs as well in internal domestic displaced people. That the first station of the refugees that they came from the Middle East to Europe, the first station was those countries, even in the Middle East, from Iraq and Iran. Then they came here, so we know that better. Actually,
I don't understand your point.
Yeah, just I'm trying to say that we had that struggle and we had that issue, that what we have to do for them, what we have to prepare for them, what is their need? Is it just the basic needs, shelter, food, and clothes, or it's beyond that? That was creating a debate and discussion that we have to provide some more education and other etc. stuff. Okay. So that was the point.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Maybe we could find like a short answer to that question, because I saw a lot of hands.
Well, if the questions are short, then maybe the answers will be short.
No, I mean, I sorry, but I couldn't. I don't know, because it's care pay case, and I cannot talk in general. I mean, I don't work in the government. I just have an organization that provides very specific needs to migrants, because I work with migrants. That includes also refugees, and that's it, right? Let's keep it like that. Yeah.
Okay. Hannes, could you maybe go all the way up? Sorry. Excuse me. I didn't see.
Yeah. Yes. Hello. Hi. My name is Musa. I'm from the Gambia. My question is directed to Brian Kanaahe. From your speech, I heard you spoke about preparedness and quality and time, and I think you are right on that. But I'm from Africa, of course, and I know Uganda is a developing country, and I also understand that from last year you received over 1.1 million refugees, mostly from Congo, South Sudan, Burundi, Rwanda, and the likes. Yeah. And now, considering the limitedness when it comes to resources in a developing country, I would like to know how you navigate when it comes to education, protection, and employability. Because I know employment is a huge problem for the Ugandans and developing countries per se. But so how do you go? And I also know that the political climate in Uganda, considering the president of Museveni, I also have I know a little bit about that. So I want to know how politically, economically, how you navigate between the Ugandans and the refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we could arrange that the microphone already goes to the next person, and I think he would be the next one. But please, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Musa. in practicality, as I've said before, the refugee policy that we have is not only for the government, it is also for you if you have an NGO or you are a private sector, you are in a private sector or even faith-based organization and you're trying to do this humanitarian work and development work, or even you're in the nexus, in there, humanitarian development nexus, in there. So let me be specific on the part of economic empowerment. Economic empowerment falls under Pillar 3. Yes, Pillar 3 of the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework. And that means that as an NGO or as an actor, you have to be in line with the National Development Plan, which also stipulates what economic activities need to be supported, particularly with, for example, with refugees. It is in the National Development Plan. So if you're like writing proposals up, looking for fundraising and so on, you have to fall under the National Development Plan. And the main activities under the economic empowerment, they look at skills building and focusing on both agriculture and non-agricultural livelihoods, because in the emergency phase, when we get refugees, they are given food and non-food items, just basically to survive. But over the 30 by 30 feet plot of land that they are given, then they're expected to actually get startups and be able to generate and boost household food security. But at the same time, look, if I come to a new area and you give me food startup and you expect me to do agriculture, here, excuse my language, but I was never a farmer where I was. So the National Development Plan takes into consideration of that and says, hold on, as you give them this, there are other non-agricultural livelihoods that they need to be participating in. So they need financial literacy skills. They need to know that it's not only agriculture they can do, there is trade, there is, we have now, thanks to technology, the emergency of refugee apps. We have very many of them coming up to connect different people, like business apps being developed, particularly relying on the creativity of young people. I can say that what is actually significantly being focused on and being invested in the part of economic empowerment, which is in my line of business, which is on building self-reliance and resilience, it is focusing on young people and how they can boost up not just the agricultural part, but the non-agricultural livelihoods. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Where is the microphone? Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
Hello, my name is Shazib. The question I would like to ask you is that immigrants are basically discriminated in the workplaces as well as in the education sector. So what steps are being taken in order to provide us with the solution, or what steps are being implemented right now so that we could overcome this problem? And as we need, if the immigrants are less responsive, then the economy won't grow.
In which country?
In general. Such as in the US, the job opportunities provided to the refugees are quite little, and they don't really progress in the upstates.
Mm-hmm. Well, but where? This is
in general.
States. Well, it's because it depends. Because in Germany, there has been a very long time call. Actually, the rapporteurs from the United Nations have been calling the attention to Germany for many years already. The educational system is very, very segregated, right? Especially that was taken by the Turkish population ever since until now. So as you know, Germany has this policy of highly educated people coming here, and that's also why I guess the integration, which you said, should be an entire holistic program, not an education course where it's mandatory, especially for the ones who have a refugee status, to go through. And they ask you to arrive until the level C1 to start, like the C1 now. It used to be BSBI, I don't know here. But now it's C1.
But which means basically
it depends on the job.
Exactly. And
it would depend on which kind of job
exactly,
you want
but
to take.
that's kind of pushing you to be very highly educated, right? Not everyone arrives there, so that depends the whole education system and what do they achieve by that. But it depends. In the United States, for example, especially the refugees who are resettled, which is the majority, they don't even require them the language. They can apply to different places and universities if they could, right? Depending if they qualify for the language later on. So it really depends on the country and depends on the local policies.
Yeah, I would like to add that we also come to the point of openness and accepting and recognizing other people's culture or other people's qualifications. I mean, the first discrimination you would face as an employee or as a person who wants to find a job in a new country is whether your qualification from your country is recognized in this country. That's the big question. If there are enough and well enough measures that requires you to qualify for that job, which is, for example, could be different. In Germany, there are sometimes in some cases you have a very difficult and restricted policy for qualification because you have studied and worked in one area and then you try to get your certificates and your results and your job certificates, everything recognized so that you can work in that field again. That is very difficult for a non-European person. And because first you need to learn the language and then you need to qualify, do this process, and mostly you have to do another, which is called Weiterbildung, or kind of an additional course or additional training so that you can become equal with the German structure or German qualification. That's a little disappointing for most of the migrants and refugees who come from non-European countries, and this is not only that you do not enter the job market that fast, this is also a feeling of not being worthy, that your qualification is not worthy, right? So what you already have done all your life is now you have to do it again.
And imagine if you arrive with the age of 35 or 40, plus the years of being qualified, that's...
Yeah, so I mean, there are some ways that it could be better. For example, qualification should be a little easier or not that sophisticated. So I see a lot of migrants and refugees who are like recognized refugees, and then they have professions from their countries. They bring skills, they bring all those skills that Germany is in shortage of. But because of this long bureaucratic process, they cannot enter the job market, and that's the first part. So both of them lose. Like Germany is losing that one very good laborer, and the migrant is losing a good career or future. And those people are working in jobs which are for these jobs. These people are very much overqualified. A qualified doctor from a Middle Eastern country is working in, for example, in a packing company. So that is not fair. If these processes can be a little opened, it's about openness, that you recognize other people's qualification too, right? So that would be a good step for both, a win-win for everyone. There's one there, and maybe...
No, she's over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
He has also.
Hello?
Okay, whichever works faster.
Okay, my name is Pamodo Drame from the Gambia. My question is based on the legal framework of the panel discussion. Do migrants have access to lawyers to help them during their application process to facilitate the smooth process of getting a resident permit, or in case their application is rejected? Do they have any lawyer, pro bono lawyer, to support them to seek redress? That is one. The second, in connection to this question, is what are the criteria that the German authorities look into to see who is capable of getting a resident permit or not?
Can you repeat your question a little, like the last part, because I didn't hear very well.
The last question is, what are the criteria or the conditions that the authorities or the people responsible for the resident permits look into to determine who should have a resident permit or not? What are the things they look into? Because some have been denied, some have been given. So what are the things they look into as far as residence permit application is concerned?
Seeking, like the asylum seeking process, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Should I? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Well, there's a process. Everyone who enters Germany, so-called illegally, then they go to police, register themselves, and they're transferred to a camp or a place where they reside for 2 to 3 months, and they get an interview there. They explain the reasons for their displacement and why they came to Germany, and then based on the Geneva Convention, their asylum application is assessed by a referee or a person from the Bundesamt für Migration und Flüchtlinge, or BAMF, the body which is responsible for refugees and migrants in Germany. They assess the application based on the evidences, based on the arguments, and based on the story that you tell why you came to Germany and what is the reason that you left your home. And based on that, they either accept you as a refugee based on the convention, or they would reject your case as not qualified for a refugee status. You are an asylum seeker before you are recognized a refugee based on the Geneva Convention, and you're an asylum seeker until the announcement is done that you are a refugee. If you are not recognized a refugee, it depends in Germany. Either if you belong to the so-called safe country, the list of the safe countries, you're directly sent to those countries back as deported in charter flights. If you belong to some other countries on which there's a debate that these countries are safe or not safe, for example, Afghanistan, they will give you either a Duldung, which is that we tolerate you, although you're not qualified for a refugee, we tolerate you for some time because the situation in your country is not that good, or your health situation or some other reasons are there that we can tolerate you. But the situation can change and you can be deported. So you have a very unsecure life with a lot of fear and such psychological pressure that you don't have a fixed residence permit in the country, and you can be deported anytime. And it is also different in Germany based on the Bundesland, or based on the federal state that you are. So things are different. Some countries deport, some states deport directly. Some states do not, and they give this kind of tolerance, residential permits. This is how the system works for the refugees.
And also, if you come from a safe country and you have a particular case because you are fleeing out also for persecution, so to say, there is where you also have to appeal to resettlement which in Germany, not that many have been resettled. Actually, only like 1,500 until the moment, which is really ridiculous, the number. And then you can apply individually. So if you know someone who has this situation and requires a lawyer, one of our members of our network, it is called Refugee Law Clinics. So it's a network of 6,000 legal, also law students. They have 32 or 36 clinics across Germany, and it's for free. They attend individually people. So it's better sometimes because it changes case per case to go and see them.
Yeah, thank you. Since we are already quite far along, I would like to take 2 questions at one time. So maybe you could start, and then the gentleman upstairs.
Can you? Oh, thank you. Sorry for embarrassing myself. Good evening. I wanted to ask a very short question since we are lacking time for María. In your speech, you mentioned that when you were applying for jobs, people didn't understand how you could work and study at the same time. I have the same problem. I mean, I provide for my family, so I have to work and study at the same time. How did you deal with this problem? How did you personally, how did you find the answer to this question? And should I even mention that I work and study at the same time in case of migration? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's really hard because at the beginning, when I was facing that, I went to as many people I know as well, especially with a migrant background, went into a very deep depression because I thought about if I did the right thing, jumping or not, because I was looking for better economical opportunities as many others, and then you basically spend all your savings in the making. So you're here, you're trapped, how can you even go back with no money? So that's also why I did what I did, Migration Hub, which right now provides myself with a job and to other people as well. But I'm not encouraging you to do the same because becoming an entrepreneur in a place like this is very, very, very hard. What I could tell you is there are more and more companies these days who are really open to understand. And if something triggered 2015 was at least to open the mindsets of many companies as well and how to deal with non-Europeans, for example, right? Also because Europeans get to have also a little bit more privilege, especially because of where did you study, if you managed to study in a local university. So when people ask me what to do if you could study in a local university, that could be a great step. But if not, try to make them understand and try to talk to them and tell them that locally speaking in your country, in your city, that is actually normal, that has nothing to do with the quality of education, which in one of the interviews I remember that was questioned to myself. Someone asked me, oh, so what's the quality of the education in Costa Rica if you did it in such a short period of time? So yeah, I mean, look at me, so I'm sure that it was not that good. Right, no, kidding. But the thing is, basically, try to be patient and try to understand from the other side that that's not their reality. So try to go to them and explain them, even getting in your CV, in your letter, in your cover letter, and explain that. Explain it also with data, with numbers, and how it is locally speaking. Make locals understand where you come from. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't have a question. I just want to raise the point of gender imbalance in the question, and maybe it would be nice to let non-males people who have questions also ask them, because it's only been men asking questions except for you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for this great panel. My name is Putri Cahya. I'm from Indonesia, and Indonesia is known as a transit country for refugees from a lot of areas in Middle East and Africa going to Australia. And I worked with a foundation last year to teach asylum seekers in Jakarta in learning the language, and I found that it is actually very hard to bridge the integration and assimilation for asylum seekers when they are in a transit country, because they are not actually interested in merging or assimilating with the local community. And even though I was teaching them the language, they are not actually very receptive. And that is something that I struggled with and discussed with the members of my organization. But then I realized that I guess because our country is not their goal, it's not their final destination, so how do we sort of like bridge the integration and to like raise the participation and cooperation between the locals and the refugees, asylum seekers and migrants when in a transit country, because it is definitely different, and how to say it, opportunities, the things that asylum seekers get in transit countries and destination countries are really different. So that is my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that's thanks for sharing that point, because transit country and refugees is something very much forgotten. There is always talk of integration. Integration actually requires the readiness from both sides. You need readiness from the people are prepared to integrate, and the people in the host community are also prepared and welcoming to receive. So the problem with transit countries is that refugees do not want to stay long there, and they don't want to merge, as you said, or they don't want to be in the local in the local community for a long time. But I know some people, my acquaintances, in Indonesia, in Malaysia. Well, the process of resettlement, they have to do this resettlement process from the UNHCR, right? The process of resettlement takes long, and 7 years, so 4 years, 3 years, so minimum is like 3 years. It takes a long time, and they need to learn the language, and the main thing they want to do mostly is to find a job, to get their expenses and their bills paid. So that's the main thing they want, and learning a language is the key for that. So I think if there is enough motivation from the locals as you to support them, I think, I mean, this is possible, and this is a necessity from the side of the migrants and refugees to get into the labor market, if not to other parts of the society. And language is an important part, so cooperation in this area is possible if there is enough effort, I guess.
I just would like to add that perhaps, because I have seen it very often, the more I travel in other places, for example, there is this organization in Lisbon in Portugal, which they also trying to bridge the gap with language. Try to avoid, and also go to that organization, to avoid the word teaching, because it seems like it's bottom up, and nobody likes to be pushed to something, right? So see it also from their perspective. They are on the way. It's a very long journey. With the things that they've gone through, it's really terrifying. So if you arrive to a place and everything that everyone wants is to teach you something, like, hey, come, you have to know, you're not gonna do it willingly. I don't know you, but I wouldn't. I will feel some sort of rejection. So something that I have seen successfully in other places like this one in Lisbon is kind of like shared culture. So they do it in sharing, which is basically you share your language and I share my language. And if you do it in both ways, kind of like what we're preaching here in how integration should look like, I think that would make people feel like you are in the eye level and not imposing something on somebody.
Good point. Where's the microphone at? Hannes, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Ashraf Nouri from Afghanistan. My question is about finding job opportunities in Germany that you just talk about a little bit. So my main question is about you said it's really tough to find job in Germany, especially for the migrants who are coming to Germany, but recently I read the news that Germany also approved the skilled worker visas for the people coming from outside Germany, like Canada and Australia. So my question is that the process is that they are coming in as a migrant in Germany and they should just pass a tough process to get a job, or they have they can find a job as the Australia and Canada provides, like they have to get some points and after that they directly get the job. So, yeah.
I mean, it depends if you're a refugee or a migrant, right? You talk about it a migrant perspective or from a refugee perspective in general?
Migrants. Actually, I read the news that the parliament just approved in Germany, they approved to provide skilled worker visas for people coming outside Germany. So I just want to ask the process of this skilled workers.
I mean, since 2012, right? I mean, with the blue card. I mean, initially, basically you can apply to find apply for the visa for job seeking, and that takes like 6 months to 1 year, kind of, right? So in 6 months or 1 year, you can you have the time basically to get a job, and if you don't get a job, then you will have to go back. Many people, what they're doing in Germany is applying for the visa for selbstständig, or how's it called, the self-employed as well. You also have 6 months to 1 year to prove some sort of incomes, basically for staying in Germany. This is a trap, I would say, because I see those cases very often on people coming here because Germany is providing jobs. But let's not forget that the majority of the jobs that Germany are providing are really qualified in very specific areas. So for many of those, you need very a specialized background, especially in the automotive and the car industry. They require for a lot of these jobs. So try to inform yourself very well in which area you want to apply, and then what are the requirements. Actually go to employment applications and read exactly what they're looking for, because I see a lot of people jumping here. It is very funny though that to see that the majority of the migrants coming to Germany to find a better job opportunity comes from countries like Spain. I mean, even within Europe, Spain and East Europe, actually they're the majority, because unfortunately the salaries there are not very good, and then Germany is kind of exposing themselves as Germany has the best salaries ever, which also careful, because the taxes are also very high, so you don't necessarily get all what is promised to you. So inform yourself in which area and where actually the majority of the jobs are being offered.
Just a little info. There will be an event on 22nd, like the day after tomorrow, in Erfurt, on this new law, which is the Zuwanderungsgesetz, the new law that is passed, or is it passed or not yet? This is passed on obtaining new laborers or experts from other countries to Germany. The problem is that it's in German. It's in if you're interested, you can join the program in the Ministry of Migration and Justice in Erfurt. If you are interested, you can. I mean, it needs some German skills. It's on this law, like how this law works and which countries and in what stages it is. So you can get more information if you're there.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. Okay, I saw another few hands, but is there another female who has a question? No? Okay, so please. Is there someone? So please give her the microphone.
So go to us.
Yeah?
That doesn't count like. Hello. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I wanted to come back to the question of policies. Brian, the way you told how this policy worked in Uganda, it sounded very efficient and working well, but at the same time it's kind of hard for me to imagine how policies do change minds. Like, is policy really the first or the most important factor in changing the mindsets of the people inside a host community, or are there also other factors that are maybe more important or the same important?
Yeah, thanks. Before I go to those other factors, most of you could be familiar with the World Humanitarian Summit 2015. And, you know, the World Humanitarian Summit was, in my opinion, supposed to be that bullet that says, look in the eye of each other and say, hold on, man, have we been doing the right thing? And what is it that we can do better? And through the World Humanitarian Summit, with the birth of the Grand Bargain and Localization Agenda, which in English means that both the traditional donors and even at the local level, there has to be a linkage that provides sustainable and long-term technical and financial support to the local agencies to be able to implement to implement quality, to implement all this. So this was actually ratified by very many countries. I don't have the number with me, but when you look at this international level, you have this commitment that comes through this big meeting. It's happened in Turkey. And how have we been, as countries, been able to localize what came out of this, international event? Now, Uganda has been able to sit down and say, let's form what is called as a transformation agenda, which is a long-term plan, an investment plan of Uganda's refugees and host communities. In fact, if you mention that you're only working with refugees, it's a lie. It is not something that we talk about in Uganda, because where there are refugees, there are host communities. And that's why you have continuous policies like this one, like this practice of wherever you're going to work. This is for your information, by the way, and mine as well. If you're going to work with refugees, say you have 10,000 euros, that 30% of that has to go to support host communities, so the nationals of Uganda. So what does that mean in simple terms? It means that we as Ugandans are going to say, these people, this project is coming to benefit these people, but at the same time it is benefiting us. So that means we should actually try to get to them, to understand, to speak with them, because we're going to speak to them anyway. We need to know what their culture is. We need to know what they eat, what they do from time to time, what their beliefs are, and consequently you're going to integrate. So to me, this is about the government commitment. And you know, that translates directly to we NGOs and all the other actors, because the 70-30 rule must work. And during accountability, when you're doing reporting and all this, and you actually don't show that how the 70-30, because that is the minimum standard, by the way. It's not a law, but it's the minimum standard. But at the very least, 70-30 rule should apply. So if you don't show that, then there is trouble. There are going to be questions, even from the government and the refugee leaders. And that's not a part that you would want. So that is one enabling factor. The second one of how we further, are there other factors that actually try to boost on this policy? Yes, of course, you have also, I think every country has some peculiar characteristics. And I would say that even when you ask many Ugandans where they came from, they would not quite identify exactly where they came from to say this is exactly where we came from and we Ugandans. A country like Uganda has quite a lot of dynamics of how different people came into the country a long time. So the issues of migration, the issues of integration, they come along from the perspective that there are many people that have come into this country. They've come here way before. So it's very important that we know and respect each other because we have this history that has been in for long. The last part I would like to highlight again is on the cultural aspects of Uganda as a country. When you look at the policy, what it says, because of the wider consultations that were made, there is nowhere that the policy steps on the values of any tribe or any clan for that matter. So I think all those, we see that, yes, it is a government directive, but at the same time it favors as the locals. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that helps somehow.
I think that was quite good, thank you. I would like to take one last question, since it's already a little bit after 9. Maybe you could give the microphone to, please go upstairs, and the man who's raising his arm so hardly.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Gani-Nyamsari. I am from Cameroon. I'm a geological engineer, and I have also had an opportunity to volunteer in refugee camps. There is a point that refugees in Uganda are much more integrated in Uganda than in Germany. However, I think that the factors that are also influencing the integration of refugees, such as the culture, has not been emphasized on. Most of the refugees in Uganda, for example, they are Africans, and so it's probably very easy for them to integrate in such a setting. But most of the refugees that come from the Middle East into Germany, for example, because I think that that's probably the ones you're talking about, they face a completely different culture, like you understand this clearly. I think generally refugees are treated in most countries as strangers, because I volunteered in a refugee camp and I spoke to a lot of them and I heard what they were telling us. So if in case we put it in such a way that probably Germany treats them as strangers, then what do we say to most of these Middle Eastern countries such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates? These are countries that are really closer in culture to this, for example, Syria and Afghanistan, closer in culture to them. But yet, though these countries are very, very rich, they don't accept the refugees, except for this case of Jordan, which has also accepted a lot of refugees, which we haven't mentioned here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. Well, of course, cultural differences are a challenge when you want to integrate people into another culture. That's a challenge, of course. But before that, if there is enough work and if there is enough openness from both sides, that could merge. But if we consider migration as a normal process or a natural thing, like you can say that people from Middle East are different from Europe. Yes, they are, in some ways they're different, but they're also human. I mean, the common thing is that they maybe speak a different language or believe in the different ceremonies or different kind of rituals, but they are same people, the same needs, the same challenges they face. They are in some ways very similar, and my comparison of Uganda and Germany is not to say that Germany is absolutely doing nothing. Germany has done a lot of things, and it has been generous relatively. But let me say that it can be Germany can do more. I mean, Germany has the capacity and the power to do more. And why those countries in the Middle East are not accepting refugees? I mean, we should ask them first. They did not sign the convention, the convention, and they are ruled mostly by dictators or some families or kings who are not in that mood. Or I mean, that's a different story. Why they are not doing? But there are some other countries who are hosting refugees. I said Jordan, for example. Pakistan, like some other countries who are like in Africa here, they're hosting a lot of refugees. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the nature of the government, the approaches that they take, and whether they're open. I mean, whether they're open for new people or not. So, the concept I'm trying to emphasize is this kind of openness to new culture, openness to new people. If you are open, you can receive, and the people are willing to integrate. If you're excluding people, then that's not a way to integrate people or even to have them at home. I hope I tried to answer the question.
Or we could ask the United Nations to charge more money to those countries who doesn't want to receive refugees and give it to the ones who doesn't have money. No, I'm kidding. No, it's really terrifying that last year the Human Rights Council of the United Nations was run by Cuba, by Saudi Arabia, by Brunei, by Venezuela. Actually, countries that should not be there, but that's how policy these days works sometimes.
I mean, that's how the rule works.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know, but I mean, come on, these are the ones who should not be put there.
Yeah. Just to say something a little bit, I think what my colleague is also talking about comes around in the idea of there is general fear. Quite frankly, if somebody I was asked to have somebody to stay at my house, where I would be concerned, what is this person bringing on board? Who are these people anyway? So I think I can try somehow to understand, which is not easy anyway, how other countries would say refugees are not, this welcome. They cannot do this. They cannot do that. But at the same time, we need more documentation, more studies actually, to show the impact, the addition of refugees. It may not be that bad anyway. I'll give an example for Uganda. When we get refugees, of course, then our host communities, again, the people who are staying there are going to be thinking, what will these people eat? Because then, and somebody who was asking about economic and livelihoods and markets, this means that the local communities have actually a role to provide food. These become the marketplaces, and people, the local communities get jobs. But then the refugees also say, we need to innovate. Maybe we can help you to improve on the market. For now, you are providing food. But look, at our home, we used to have this type of food. So you have diversity coming in. And that's why then consequently, they link that into existing market structures. Like now we have apps like Jumia, where you order food online. And consequently, this becomes, it builds up the economic potential of the country. Nevertheless, I think there's still more studies that should continue up to show the added value of refugees and even the host communities, so that I think more countries can notice that it's not that bad anyway.
Mm-hmm. However, Brian, I would like to say that this is also where we need more media present in sharing that information, because that information exists.
True.
Recently, actually by the end of last year, a study was shown in the United States that in the last decade, only by people with a refugee status provided with revenue to the government with taxes with $62 billion. And yet media prefer to portray Trump.
Yeah.
There are studies and there is enough evidence that migrants, in this case, the refugees who were part of the studies, provided, and not only, I don't know how many times they gave back what it was invested in their resettlement.
Well, I think media is a very general term. Maybe there are some medias who are doing pro-refugees or anti-refugees, or like, let's say, it's a very general term, right? So categorize all of them.
Well, I categorize the United States media. I only see Trump every day.
That might be right. I think we people have agency too. Like, we come from different countries, we see refugees, we see migrants. Well, we could be also kind of contributing in some way to open and change the minds. Like, it's not always like media is not one person. Media is a big thing. Like, or people are also individuals, and we are among the individuals. It's possible to change the minds. It's possible to talk to the neighbor. It's possible to talk to the family. So things can be changed, and we should feel this kind of agency that we are also able to do something, right? So not only that others should do that, but we can also do that. I'm just trying to emphasize this kind of volunteering and advocacy and these kind of fields.
We should be critical as well. I mean, it's fine. And yes, I mean, all of us here in this panel, I guess we've done enough things to show that individuals can make a change, that for sure. But we cannot forget that there are people who have more agency than one-on-one, and we need to be also critical. And as an individuals, as students, as young people, we should also be critical in trying to stop being consumers of those who are not basically providing this information, because it's misleading. And it's not only misleading, it's changing politics. I mean, I am one of those, but how can it be that, for example, yesterday I saw more mobilization on Twitter for the end of Game of Thrones than the elections of the European Parliament this weekend? So that's when I'm saying we need to be critical, and we really need to touch base to the reality. There are more people with way more agency. That information, unfortunately, is not helping anyway.
I mean, you're perfectly right, but at the end, I would like to end with like a positive notion and with a positive outlook.
We have great, that's great.
Yeah, but I think we covered quite some ground, and I think we also covered a good globalized discussion here in this room. I hope that everybody here can take some snips and pieces of what we discussed about the various levels. We talked about the individual, the group level, the agencies, the state policies. We talked about different countries, different settings, and I hope that every one of you can take just little snips and pieces from this evening, and maybe also continue this discussion we had tonight for the whole week. And at the end, I would like to thank all of the panelists for their input. I would like to thank you for your personal stories and your questions. I would like to thank, of course, the organizers of this wonderful summit here. Have a great evening, and I hope we will see you during the week and maybe next year again here.